At 7:52 a.m., I was standing barefoot on my kitchen tile, staring at a red disconnection notice on my phone, when I saw a picture that made my hands start shaking. The power company was giving me 8 minutes. 8 minutes before they shut off the electricity in the apartment I had begged God to help me keep. And while I was calculating how to stretch $43 in my checking account, my husband was fastening a diamond bracelet around another woman's wrist. I didn't know that yet, but I was about to find out. And what I discovered that morning didn't just change my marriage. It changed the way I understand money, loyalty, and survival. Before I tell you how that bracelet connected to the red notice in my hand, I need you to stay with me. Because what looked like financial hardship from the outside was something much darker behind closed doors. If you've ever wondered how someone can drain your bank account while smiling at you across the dinner table, this story will answer that. Subscribe and stay to the end, because the moment I realized where our money was really going still gives me chills. My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 38 years old. I'm a Black woman born and raised in Maryland, the daughter of a postal worker and a nurse's aide. I grew up in a house where bills were paid on time, even if it meant my mother wore the same winter coat for 10 years. I grew up believing financial stability meant safety, that if you worked hard, loved hard, and sacrificed together, you built something no storm could knock down. I believed that. I really did. When I married Daniel, I thought we were building something unbreakable. He was driven, charming, ambitious in a way that made me feel secure. We both worked. We both contributed. We both talked about our future. But somewhere along the way, our started shrinking. It started subtly. He began talking about investments, about consolidating accounts, about maximizing returns. He said it made sense for him to manage everything because he followed the market more closely. I trusted him. We moved our savings into accounts under his dashboard access. Retirement funds, bonuses, emergency savings, all optimized. I still had my debit card. I still paid my half of everything. On paper, nothing looked wrong. But inside our home, something was shifting. He began saying we needed to tighten up. No more spontaneous dinners, no more weekend trips, no unnecessary spending, Naomi. I canceled my gym membership. I stopped getting my hair done professionally. I switched brands at the grocery store. I told friends, we're just being smarter financially. I believed we were broke. For almost 2 years, I believed we were barely staying afloat, and I carried the guilt of it. Because every time I ordered takeout or bought something small for myself, he'd sigh. Not loudly, but just enough. You know we're trying to get ahead. So I tried harder. I cooked more. I spent less. I worked freelance projects at night. I told myself this was what marriage required. Sacrifice, teamwork, faith. Then came the red notice. I had never seen one before. Subject line: final disconnection warning. Balance due, $612.47. I remember whispering, that can't be right. We had money. We had to have money. I opened our joint dashboard, the one he said was simplified. Zero available. I opened my personal account, 4318. I felt my stomach drop. I called him. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. That's when I opened Instagram, not to snoop, not to investigate, just to distract myself from the panic. And there it was. A tagged photo. Not from his account, from hers. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew his watch. I knew his hand. I knew the way his thumb bends slightly inward when he holds something delicate. He was smiling, and on her wrist, a diamond bracelet that caught the light like it had been waiting for that exact moment. Caption: you deserve beautiful things. The timestamp? The night before. The same night he told me, we need to be careful with money this month. The same night I told our son we couldn't order pizza because Daddy's tightening the budget. The electricity company called again at 7:55. 3 minutes left. And that's when something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but quietly, like glass under pressure. Because in that moment, I understood something I had refused to see. We weren't broke. We weren't struggling. We weren't budgeting. Our financial problems were funding her lifestyle. And what I would uncover over the next few weeks, the receipts, the transfers, the secret withdrawals, the cash purchases, would force me to confront not just his betrayal, but my own blindness. And before I tell you what happened when I finally confronted him about that bracelet, you need to understand how I got here. Because women like me don't wake up one morning and suddenly find themselves 8 minutes away from losing electricity. We get there slowly. We get there trusting. We get there believing in love. Let me take you back to the beginning, before the red notice, before the bracelet, before I learned how expensive betrayal could be. There was admiration. I met Daniel when I was 26. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't the kind of man who drew attention walking into a room. He was steady. That's what attracted me. Steady, felt safe. I had grown up watching my father leave before sunrise every day, steel-toed boots by the door, thermos in hand. I equated consistency with character, discipline with integrity. Daniel talked about 5-year plans on our third date. He talked about building equity instead of renting, about mutual funds, about credit scores, about legacy. I remember thinking, God, thank you. A grown man. When we married, we promised each other transparency. We opened a joint account. We split bills evenly at first, not because we had to, but because we were proud of being a team. 2 ambitious adults building together. When I got promoted, we celebrated with champagne. When he switched companies for a better salary, I baked him his favorite sweet potato pie. We weren't rich, but we were stable. Or at least, that's what I thought. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does. It began with logic. Naomi, it makes more sense if I manage the investments. I follow the markets daily. That was true. I didn't. Let's consolidate everything so we can track it better. That sounded responsible. High-yield savings accounts, tax advantages, compound growth. He said words that made me feel secure, not suspicious, and I handed over access. Gradually, the money stopped feeling like something we both touched. It became something he handled. If I needed to move funds, I asked. If I wanted to see returns, he showed me summaries. Not statements. Summaries. But I didn't question it, because from the outside, we looked disciplined. When friends complained about debt, we nodded sympathetically. When family talked about financial stress, we offered advice. We're just focused right now, he'd say, trying to be strategic, and I would smile, proud. Then came the first comment that made me shrink a little. It was small. I bought a $68 dress for a colleague's wedding. He glanced at the bag and said lightly, "Is that necessary right now?" He didn't yell. He didn't accuse. He just tilted his head slightly. And something in me adjusted. I returned the dress. Not because we couldn't afford it, but because I didn't want to be the reason we fell behind. That became our rhythm. He tightened. I adapted. He'd say, "Let's pause eating out for a few months." I learned new recipes. He'd say, "We don't need to upgrade the car yet." I stopped mentioning it. He'd sigh when the grocery total passed $200. I switched brands. I told myself this was maturity. That marriage meant aligning priorities. Meanwhile, his world expanded. Longer hours, more client dinners, more networking events. He started wearing cologne I hadn't seen before. When I asked about it, he said, "It was a gift from the firm." I believed him. Why wouldn't I? If he came home late, he blamed traffic. If he guarded his phone, he said he was reviewing confidential emails. If I asked about account balances, he'd answer in generalities. We're fine. Trust me. I've got it handled, and I did trust him. Because nothing about our daily life screamed crisis. We still had date nights, just cheaper ones. We still traveled, just less often. We still laughed. But there were moments, small flickers, that I ignored. Like the time I logged into our utility portal and saw the balance overdue by 2 weeks. I texted him, "Hey, electric bill's late?" He responded, "Auto pay glitch. I'll fix it." I didn't check again. Or the afternoon I suggested increasing my retirement contribution. He said quickly, "Let's not lock up liquidity right now." Liquidity. Such a confident word. I nodded. The first time he used the phrase, "we're stretched thin," I felt ashamed, because I had just ordered takeout the night before. I started keeping mental tabs of my spending. I cut my own hair between salon visits. I canceled streaming subscriptions. I even picked up freelance consulting work in the evenings after putting our son to bed. When Daniel noticed, he kissed my forehead. "I appreciate you stepping up, like I had been slacking before. And still, I didn't see it. I didn't see the pattern forming, because from the outside, our life still looked controlled, calculated, responsible. But here's what I know now. Financial control doesn't always come with screaming. Sometimes it comes with spreadsheets. Sometimes it sounds like discipline. Sometimes it looks like leadership. And sometimes, it feels like love. Until the day you realize the tightening wasn't for security. It was concealment. The first time I truly felt fear wasn't when the red notice came. It was a month earlier. I was at the grocery store with our son. He wanted strawberries. They were out of season and overpriced. I hesitated. He looked up at me and said, "Daddy says we can't buy stuff like that right now." I froze. Because I had never said that to him. I bought the strawberries anyway. And that night, when Daniel saw the receipt on the counter, he said, "We talked about this." We? When had we talked? I apologized. For fruit. That was the moment normalization turned into something heavier. But I still didn't name it. I still believed we were in this together. I still believed the tightening was temporary. I still believed my husband was protecting our future. I had no idea he was protecting something else. And before I show you the first real crack in that illusion, the one that started unraveling everything, you need to understand something about me. I don't scare easily. I don't overreact. And I don't look for betrayal. So when the signs started stacking up, I explained them away. Until explaining them required lying to myself. And that's where the story really begins. The first real crack didn't look like betrayal. It looked like ambition. Daniel started going to the gym again. At first, I was proud of him. He'd wake up early, lace up his sneakers, kiss me on the forehead and say, "Trying to get disciplined again." Disciplined. That word again. Then the gym turned into late strategy calls. The strategy calls turned into client dinners. The client dinners turned into nights where his location sharing mysteriously glitched. I noticed. But I didn't accuse. Because here's the thing about being the calm one in the marriage. You start competing with your own intuition. You don't want to be dramatic. You don't want to be insecure. You don't want to be that wife. So you collect questions quietly, and you wait. The first time I felt something tighten in my chest was over something ridiculous. A watch. He had an old stainless steel watch he used to wear when we first dated. It had been sitting in a drawer for years with a dead battery. One afternoon, I saw it on his wrist again. Polished, shining. I smiled and said, "Oh, you fixed it?" He nodded casually. "Yeah. Figured I should start presenting better." Presenting to who? I didn't ask that out loud. But the question lingered. Then came the cologne. Not the subtle one he'd worn for years. Something sharper. Colder. When I leaned in to hug him one evening, it didn't smell like my husband. It smelled like a department store display. "You like it?" he asked. "It's strong," I said carefully. "It's expensive," he replied. Expensive. We were stretched thin, remember? We couldn't afford strawberries, but we could afford expensive cologne. I swallowed that contradiction too, because denial is easier than disruption. The second crack came in the form of a glitch. I was paying bills one night when I noticed the electric account still wasn't on autopay. I logged in. Past due, 18 days. That wasn't a glitch. That was neglect. I texted him again. "Hey, the electric's late. Can you handle it?" 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, "Relax, it's fine. Relax." I stared at the word. It wasn't reassurance. It was dismissal. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself this was temporary. I told myself marriage had seasons. But the season felt colder. Then one Saturday morning while he was in the shower, his phone buzzed repeatedly on the dresser. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. It was just persistent. Buzz, buzz, buzz. I glanced at the screen. The preview didn't show a name, just a heart emoji. And a message. "Can't stop thinking about last night." My entire body went still. I didn't open it. I didn't touch it. I just stared. Then the water shut off. I placed the phone exactly where it had been and walked into the kitchen like nothing had happened. He came out wrapped in a towel, steam following him like fog. "Everything good?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. My voice didn't shake, but my hands did when I picked up my coffee mug. That day, he was overly affectionate. Too affectionate. He kept touching my lower back, calling me baby, asking if I wanted to go out for dinner. It felt like performance, like someone overcorrecting. And here's the dangerous part. Part of me felt relieved. Relieved that he was being warm. Relieved that maybe I imagined it. Relieved that I didn't have to confront something that could shatter my life. Because confronting it would mean risking everything. Our home, our son, our stability. our reputation. So I said nothing. I folded the suspicion into myself. Weeks passed. The money conversation intensified. We need to pause unnecessary spending. We're overextended. You don't understand liquidity. I began asking for specifics. How overextended? We're fine, Naomi. Why are you obsessing? Obsessing? There it was. Gaslighting doesn't always come with shouting. Sometimes it comes with vocabulary. I stopped asking. But I started watching. He guarded his phone more. He angled his screen away from me on the couch. He started taking long showers with his phone inside the bathroom. That was new. I remember standing in the hallway one night, listening to the water run longer than usual. I told myself he was decompressing. I told myself I was paranoid. Then came the grocery store incident, the card decline. I had gone slightly over what I calculated. Nothing dramatic. Just a normal cart. When the cashier said, "It didn't go through," my face flushed. I tried again, declined. I stepped aside and used my personal debit card. That's when I saw it. 4318s. I didn't panic in the store. I waited until I got home. Why was the joint card declined? I asked calmly. He didn't look up from his laptop. I moved some funds around. To where? Investments. For how long? Why are you interrogating me? Interrogating. That word hit differently. I wasn't accusing. I was asking about groceries. But somehow I was the aggressor. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to his breathing, steady, unbothered, and I realized something terrifying. I no longer understood our financial reality. I didn't know what we had. I didn't know what we owed. I didn't know what was true. And when you don't know the truth about money in your own home, you don't know your position. That's when the awakening began. Not with the bracelet, not with the red notice, but with a quiet, internal shift. I stopped assuming we were broke, and I started wondering, if we're broke, where is the money going? I didn't have the answer yet, but I was about to find it. And when I did, I would wish for a split second that I had stayed asleep. Once doubt enters your body, it doesn't sit quietly. It starts connecting things, replaying conversations, reframing memories, and suddenly, nothing feels neutral anymore. I didn't turn into a detective overnight. I turned into a woman trying to understand why her reality didn't add up. The next crack came through email. Not his. Mine. A notification from our bank about a large transaction. Subject line, transaction alert, $8,462 13. My heart started pounding before I even opened it. We didn't spend that kind of money. Ever. Not on furniture, not on vacations, not on emergencies, certainly not while we were overextended. I logged into the account dashboard. The balance looked lower than I remembered. Not empty, but lower. There it was. Pending transaction. Merchant name, Tiffany & Co. For a full 5 seconds, my brain refused to process it. Tiffany wasn't groceries. It wasn't a utility bill. It wasn't a business expense. It was jewelry, luxury jewelry. I clicked into the transaction details, point of sale purchase, in store. The night before. The same night he told me, "We need to be careful this month." The same night I told our son we couldn't order pizza. I stared at the screen so long my vision blurred. Maybe it was a client gift. Maybe it was an investment piece. Maybe... My mind kept offering explanations like oxygen masks, but something inside me already knew. I opened Instagram again, this time intentionally. I didn't scroll his page. I searched his recent follows. There weren't many. He kept his circle small. One profile stood out. Private, but her profile picture was public. She was smiling, confident, wearing a sleeveless black dress, and on her wrist. My stomach dropped. The bracelet. Thin, elegant, unmistakable, catching light exactly the way diamonds are designed to. The caption beneath her most recent post read, "You deserve beautiful things." Posted 11 hours ago. Location tag, downtown rooftop lounge. The same rooftop he once told me was overpriced and unnecessary. My hands went cold. But here's what hurt the most. He looked proud. Not guilty, not discreet. Proud. That's when the pieces started assembling themselves without my permission. The new cologne, the watch repair, the sudden obsession with presentation, the tighter budget at home, the late nights, the electric bill delay, the card decline, the funds being moved around. It wasn't that we were broke, it was that our money had been redirected. Quietly, strategically, away from us, toward her. I grabbed a notebook, not because I planned to confront him, but because I needed proof for myself. I wrote down the bracelet amount, 8,262 13s. Then I opened past statements, scrolling, and there they were. Charges that didn't fit our narrative. Luxury hotel, 1,229s. Fine dining, 742 hours. Uber Black, 183 hours. Spa, 614 doors. Dates that coincided with client dinners. Locations that didn't match his office address. I added numbers until they stopped feeling like numbers and started feeling like betrayal quantified. Over 3 months, nearly $27,000. I sat back in my chair. $27,000. Do you know what $27,000 does? It pays for almost 2 years of our son's tuition, 16 months of electricity, emergency savings, security, stability, peace. Instead, it bought champagne. It bought silk dresses. It bought a diamond bracelet. The most painful part wasn't even the amount. It was the narrative. For 2 years, I had been shrinking myself, canceling, adjusting, sacrificing, while he expanded, upgraded, indulged. And suddenly I understood something devastating. He didn't need me to spend less because we were struggling. He needed me to spend less so he could spend more somewhere else. The realization didn't come with screaming. It came with silence, a deep, hollow silence in my chest. I checked the electric portal again. Still overdue. Final notice issued. Due in 2 days. I felt something shift. Not panic. Clarity. For the first time in months, I stopped asking, "Are we okay?" and started asking, "What else is he hiding?" That night, he came home at 9:17 p.m., smelling like that cologne. He kissed my cheek. "How was your day?" I looked at him carefully. Really looked. At the man I built a life with. At the man who once split fries with me because we were saving money. At the man who now carried $8,000 secrets on his credit card. "It was fine," I said. He nodded, went to shower, with his phone. Again. And this time, instead of pretending I didn't notice, I followed the sound of the water down the hallway. Not to accuse, not to fight, but to confirm. Because suspicion is heavy. But confirmation? Confirmation changes everything. I stood outside the bathroom door, steam slipping through the crack, water running, and beneath it, his voice, soft, intimate, not work-related, not professional, intimate. I didn't need to hear words. The tone was enough. That was the moment I stopped being confused and started being awake, but I still hadn't confronted him. Not yet. Because before I did, I needed to know exactly how deep this went, and what I uncovered next would make that bracelet look small. Once you hear the tone of betrayal, you can't unhear it. I stood outside that bathroom door longer than I should have. Not because I was trying to collect evidence, but because I was trying to collect myself. His voice was low, soft. The kind of softness he hadn't used with me in months. I walked back to the kitchen before the water stopped running. When he came out 10 minutes later, wrapped in steam and confidence, he looked at me like nothing in the world had shifted. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. And this time, my voice didn't shake, because something inside me had stabilized. Not healed, not calmed, stabilized. There's a difference. That night, after he fell asleep, I opened his laptop. Not to snoop, to confirm. We shared devices. We always had. Transparency had been one of our pillars. At least, I thought it had. His email was logged in. Inbox clean. Too clean. I clicked folders, archive, spam, promotions, nothing obvious. But then I noticed something small. A folder titled Receipts. Neutral enough. I opened it, and there they were, PDF after PDF, luxury boutique hotel, 1,842s, fine dining, 913, private wine tasting, 1,876, Tiffany & Co., 8,462, 13s, all neatly filed, organized, intentional. He hadn't been careless, he had been meticulous. I downloaded them to a flash drive, not dramatically, not angrily, quietly, methodically, because clarity demands documentation. Then I opened our investment dashboard. For the first time, I didn't accept summaries. I clicked transaction history, scrolling. and I felt my stomach twist. Large withdrawals labeled reallocation, portfolio adjustment, cash transfer, dates aligned with the receipts. He hadn't just used his credit card. He had liquidated assets, moved money from our future, converted security into spectacle. I pulled out my notebook again. I began matching dates: bracelet purchase, investment withdrawal, hotel stay, cash transfer, dinner, portfolio reduction. It wasn't random, it was systematic. For 2 years, he had been tightening our household budget while expanding a second life. And the most dangerous part? He did it without raising suspicion. Because he framed it as discipline, as strategy, as leadership. That's when another memory surfaced. 3 months earlier, I had asked if we could refinance the mortgage to lower our rate. He had responded quickly, "Now's not the time to move things around." Now I understood. He didn't want movement. He wanted opacity. I checked our electric account again. Final notice. Due tomorrow by 8 a.m. Balance, $612.47. I looked back at the bracelet receipt. $8,462.13. One bracelet could have paid our electricity for over a year. One bracelet could have erased every tightening conversation. One bracelet could have saved me from standing in a grocery line with a declined card. And suddenly the math stopped being financial. It became emotional. He wasn't just spending money. He was reallocating value. Away from me. Away from our son. Toward someone who didn't witness the early mornings. Who didn't sit through pediatric appointments. Who didn't stretch groceries. Who didn't return dresses. Toward someone who only saw the polished watch. The cologne. The rooftop dinners. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark living room. The house felt different. Not unstable. Exposed. Like the walls had been listening to lies. At 6:42 a.m., the next morning, I logged into the bank again. Available funds in the joint account, $312. My personal account, $43.18. I transferred the $312. It wasn't enough. I stared at the electric portal. Payment required, $612.47. I checked his business account access. Locked. I called him. He declined. I texted, "Electric is being shut off today." 3 minutes later, "Handle it. Handle it." 2 words. No concern, no urgency, no apology. I typed back, "With what?" No response. I felt something cold spread through my chest. Not sadness, not fear, resolution. I opened a credit card in my name that I had avoided using. Low limit. High interest. I paid the electricity. Confirmation number received at 7:57 a.m., 3 minutes before disconnection. And that's when Instagram delivered the final blow. The bracelet picture, clearer this time, different angle. Her wrist resting on his chest, his watch visible. Caption: "Some men know how to show up." I zoomed in. I recognized the shirt. It was the same one he wore the night he told me, "We need to be careful this month." My throat tightened. Not because he bought her jewelry, but because he framed our struggle as shared. He made me complicit in my own deprivation. He turned loyalty into leverage, and that's when I realized something else. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't midlife confusion. This wasn't temporary weakness. This was choice, repeated, calculated, financed. I looked at the time. 8:02 a.m. The electricity stayed on. But something else turned off inside me. Because once you see the full paper trail, you can't unsee it. And once you understand that your financial hardship was manufactured, you stop asking how to fix the marriage. You start asking how to survive the truth. That morning, while he was probably fastening another cufflink or drafting another excuse, I made a decision. Not to confront him immediately. Not to scream. Not to beg. But to gather everything. Because if he had been strategic for 2 years, I was about to become strategic too. And what I uncovered next, the transfers he thought I'd never trace, would prove that the bracelet was only the beginning. Once I stopped reacting and started observing, everything changed. Not outside. Inside. I stopped asking him questions. I stopped seeking reassurance. I stopped explaining my spending. Instead, I began documenting. Dates, amounts, transfers, language patterns. Because once you understand someone is capable of deception, you stop listening to tone and start studying behavior. 3 days after the electricity payment, he came home unusually cheerful. He poured himself a glass of wine, the expensive kind, the kind we couldn't justify buying anymore. "You seem relaxed," I said carefully. "Closed a big deal." he replied. I watched him. He didn't ask how the electric situation got resolved. He didn't ask if it had even been resolved. He assumed I would figure it out. And that's when I understood something deeper. The financial pressure wasn't accidental. It was leverage. If I felt dependent, if I felt uncertain, if I felt stretched, I would stay quiet. Dependence keeps women docile. Confusion keeps them compliant. Security makes them dangerous. And I was becoming dangerous. That night, while he slept, I accessed the tax documents. I hadn't looked closely at them before. Why would I? We filed jointly. But this time I scanned every line, and there it was. A secondary account listed under income distribution. Not hidden, just never discussed. It was connected to a consulting LLC, his consulting LLC, one he had started for flexibility. I searched the business registry. Active, profitable, separate, deposits flowing in regularly. Not small ones, 5 figures, consistent. And none of it had been mentioned in our household tightening. None of it had gone toward utilities, or tuition, or savings recovery. It had gone somewhere else. I checked transaction history again. Transfers from the LLC to personal spending, high-end boutiques, travel bookings, dining, and cash withdrawals, large ones. Cash is harder to trace, but cash leaves patterns too. Every withdrawal date aligned with either a luxury charge or a late-night absence. He hadn't just been spending money. He had created a financial shadow life. Parallel income, parallel expenses, parallel intimacy. And I had been financing half of the visible household while he funded an invisible one. I felt heat rise in my chest, but not rage, precision. Because here's what betrayal does when it hits a woman who finally sees clearly. It turns pain into calculation. The next morning, he left early. Breakfast meeting, he said. I nodded. After he walked out, I called the bank. Calm voice. Professional tone. I need full statements for the last 24 months. There was a pause. Ma'am, some of these accounts are under primary authorization only. I am a joint account holder, I replied evenly. Another pause. Then, we can release joint account records. Good. It was enough. By afternoon, I had PDF statements filling my desktop. I began marking them with color codes. Blue for household, red for unexplained, gold for luxury. The red began swallowing the blue. 2 years. Nearly $92,000 redirected. $92,000. I stopped breathing for a moment. That wasn't indulgence. That was extraction. And suddenly every, "we can't afford it," replayed in my mind like a recording I had misheard. We can't afford it. We need to be disciplined. We're stretched. No, he was reallocating. And the most disturbing realization came next. He had reduced my financial visibility slowly, not abruptly, gradually. First managing investments, then discouraging retirement adjustments, then consolidating dashboards, then labeling me obsessive when I asked questions. Control disguised as competence. That evening, I made dinner. He walked in, kissed my cheek. You okay? He asked again. That question had become routine. I looked at him differently now, not as my husband, but as a man who believed he had engineered the narrative. I'm fine, I said. And for the first time, I meant it, because calm is powerful when it's informed. After dinner, he mentioned another out-of-town strategy session, Friday through Sunday. I nodded. Sounds productive, he smiled. That smile used to make me feel chosen. Now it made me feel underestimated. When he went to shower, with his phone, I didn't stand outside the door this time. I didn't need to. I already had the story. Instead, I opened Zillow. Not because I planned to leave immediately, but because information creates options, and options create leverage. I searched rental prices, school districts, commute times. I wrote numbers down, not impulsively, strategically, because if he had been planning an exit without telling me, I would not be the one blindsided. The following afternoon, while he was supposedly at his meeting, I received another notification. Large withdrawal, $5,000 cash. Location, same downtown district as the bracelet purchase. I opened Instagram again. Her page. Public this time. A photo posted 30 minutes earlier. Weekend getaway. Luxury hotel suite. Champagne on ice. and on her wrist, the bracelet. Same one, and in the reflection of the window behind her, his silhouette, not fully visible, but enough. That's when something inside me stopped hoping. Hope can be a trap when it's attached to denial. Clarity, though painful, is stabilizing. I closed the app, closed the laptop, and sat in silence. Because here's what most people don't understand. The worst part isn't discovering the affair. It's discovering the strategy, the years of orchestration, the quiet budget constraints that weren't about survival. They were about funding seduction. And before I confronted him, before I said a single word about the bracelet, I needed one final confirmation, one piece of evidence he couldn't explain away. And I was about to get it. Perfect. We continue. The final confirmation didn't come from Instagram. It didn't come from receipts. It didn't even come from the bracelet. It came from arrogance. People who believe they're in control get careless, not because they're sloppy, because they're confident. That Friday night, he left with a leather overnight bag I hadn't seen before. Not his usual duffel. New, structured, intentional. Strategy session might run late, he said casually. I nodded. Drive safe. I didn't ask where. I didn't ask with whom. I already knew it wasn't a boardroom. After he left, I sat on the couch in silence. No tears, no shaking, just stillness. Then I remembered something. The shared tablet, the one we used mostly for streaming. It was still synced to his Apple ID. He had unsynced his phone months ago, but not the tablet. Confidence makes people overlook small doors. I opened the Messages app. Nothing. Clean. Then I opened Recently Deleted. Empty. Too empty. So I opened the cloud backup settings, and there it was, automatic photo sync. He hadn't disabled it. The most recent uploads began populating. Hotel lobby, mirrored elevator selfie, room keycard on a marble counter, and then her wrist. Up close, the bracelet sparkling against hotel lighting. But this time, there was more. A video, 6 seconds long, muted at first. I turned the volume up. Laughter. His laughter. The kind he hadn't used in our kitchen in months. Worth every penny, he said in the background. Worth every penny. My chest tightened. Not because of the money, because of the tone. Admiration. Pride. As if he had accomplished something noble. I paused the video. Replayed it. There was no ambiguity left. No possible business explanation. No strategic dinner. No client entertainment. This was celebration. Funded celebration. And suddenly I understood something that hit harder than the affair itself. He wasn't hiding because he felt guilty. He was hiding because he felt entitled. Entitled to the money, entitled to the second life, entitled to my compliance. The next image loaded. Dinner receipt on a table. 1,174 hours 56. 2 entrees, 2 cocktails, dessert, champagne, date stamped. Same week as the electric shutoff notice. I whispered out loud. You let the lights almost go out. Not because you had to, because you chose to. That distinction changed everything. I sat there for nearly an hour, scrolling, watching, absorbing. The narrative was complete now. He had created scarcity at home to create abundance elsewhere. And I had participated in the scarcity. Willingly, faithfully, proudly. That realization hurt deeper than betrayal, because it forced me to confront my own silence. My own rationalizations, my own shrinking. At 11:48 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from him. Long day. Don't wait up. I stared at the message. Then I opened the cloud again. He had just taken another photo. Balcony view. City lights. Champagne glasses clinking. I could almost hear him. Performing generosity. Performing success. Performing masculinity. On my retirement contributions. On my canceled hair appointments. On my son's postponed sneakers. That was the moment something in me solidified. I wasn't going to confront him emotionally. I wasn't going to scream about the bracelet. I wasn't going to accuse him of cheating. I was going to confront the numbers. Because numbers don't gaslight. Numbers don't sigh. Numbers don't call you obsessive. Numbers testify. Saturday morning, I called a financial attorney. Not dramatically, not hysterically, professionally. I need a consultation regarding marital asset transparency. He asked a few preliminary questions. Are there hidden accounts? Yes. Do you have documentation? Yes. Has he restricted your access to funds? Yes. Silence. Then, you need to come in Monday. Good. That gave me 48 hours. 48 hours to remain composed. 48 hours to gather every document. 48 hours to decide who I was going to be next. When he came home Sunday evening, he looked refreshed, relaxed. He kissed my forehead like routine. How was your weekend? He asked. Productive, I replied. He poured himself wine again. Same bottle, same expensive label. We should open something nice soon, he said. I looked at him steadily. Yes, I said. We should. He didn't notice the shift. He didn't see the distance forming behind my calm. Because he believed I was still operating from fear, from confusion, from dependence. He had no idea I was operating from clarity. That night, as he slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling again. But this time, I wasn't counting contradictions. I was counting assets. I was calculating leverage. I was mapping an exit strategy. And before I confronted him about the bracelet, before I told him I had seen the video, before I told him I knew about the $92,000, there was one more thing I needed to confirm. One final transfer. One final movement of money. Because when I say our financial problems were funding her lifestyle, I mean it went deeper than jewelry. Much deeper. The final transfer happened on a Tuesday. Of course it did. Nothing dramatic ever happens on a Friday night. It happens on ordinary Tuesdays, at 2:37 p.m. to be exact. I remember because I was sitting at my dining table, the same table where I once calculated grocery coupons, when the notification came through. Transfer completed. Amount, $1,800. From joint investment portfolio to external account. My breath stopped. External account. Not the LLC, not his personal checking. External. I logged in immediately. The portfolio balance dropped in front of my eyes. $18,500. No memo, no explanation, no portfolio adjustment. Just gone. My hands didn't shake this time. They steadied. Because something about this felt final. I clicked transaction details. Receiving institution, private wealth management account. Different bank, different routing number. Account holder name partially masked, but not completely. The first initial visible, a last name initial visible, and I already knew. I searched her full name, LinkedIn. There it was, employer listed, private wealth management firm, downtown, the same district as the bracelet, the same district as the hotel, the same district as the cash withdrawals. This wasn't spontaneous romance. This was investment. In her. In access. In alignment. He hadn't just been buying her things. He had been positioning himself inside her financial ecosystem. And suddenly, every strategy session made sense. He wasn't just seducing her. He was merging resources. At 2:41 p.m., I felt something inside me detach. Not my heart. My illusion. Because this wasn't midlife crisis. This wasn't weakness. This wasn't ego. This was migration. He was moving assets before moving himself, securing liquidity outside our marital framework, and I had almost missed it. I pulled up the last 12 months of transfers, smaller amounts at first. $3,000, $4,500, $2,200, testing, gradual, then larger, bolder, until today, $18,500. My mind started connecting legal timelines, asset division, marital property, discovery. He wasn't just cheating, he was pre-dividing, without telling me. That realization ignited something sharp inside my chest. Because betrayal is painful. But strategic financial displacement? That's predatory. I called the attorney immediately. He answered on the second ring. I just saw a large transfer, I said evenly. How large? He asked. 18,500. Silence. From a joint marital asset? Yes. Do you have documentation? Yes. Another pause. Good. Do not confront him yet. I wasn't planning to. You need to preserve everything. Screenshot, download, timestamp. Already done. He exhaled slowly. This just changed the leverage. Leverage. That word felt different coming from someone on my side. I ended the call and sat back in my chair. For 2 years, I had been operating from confusion. Now I was operating from evidence. At 3:12 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from him. Dinner might be late tonight. Of course it would. I opened Instagram. Her story had been updated. Champagne again. Caption. Building something powerful. I stared at the words. Building something powerful. with my retirement, with my sacrifice, with my son's postponed summer camp. I zoomed into the corner of the frame. There it was, a leather portfolio, embossed with the same wealth management firm logo. She wasn't just wearing the bracelet, she was onboarding him. The final confirmation wasn't romantic, it was financial integration. And in that moment, something crystal clear formed in my mind. He believed I would stay. He believed I would remain financially disoriented. He believed the narrative of tightening would keep me compliant long enough for him to restructure everything. He underestimated the moment a woman stopped shrinking. At 6:48 p.m., he walked through the door. Loose tie, relaxed posture, controlled smile. "How was your day?" he asked. I studied him carefully. Every detail, the confidence, the assumption, the absence of guilt. "It was illuminating," I replied. He paused briefly, then shrugged it off. "Good." He went to shower, phone in hand, water running, just like before. Only this time I wasn't standing outside the door. I was sitting at the table with printed statements neatly stacked, bracelet receipt on top, $8,462.13, hotel charges behind it, investment withdrawals highlighted, and at the very back, $18,500 transfer confirmation. When he came out, steam trailing behind him, he saw the papers. For the first time in months. He hesitated, just slightly. "What's all that?" he asked. My voice was calm, measured, controlled. "Our financial problems," I said, "and her lifestyle." He didn't speak immediately, didn't deny, didn't deflect. He calculated. I could see it in his eyes. He was assessing exposure, not regret. And that was the final piece, because if he had shown panic, if he had shown shame, if he had shown remorse, maybe the confrontation would have unfolded differently, but what I saw instead was irritation, like I had disrupted his timeline. And in that moment, I understood something powerful. The electricity almost went out. The groceries were declined. The budget tightened. Not because we were struggling, but because I was funding a transition I never agreed to. And now, the only question left was this. Would I let him finish it? Or would I shut it down? What I did next changed everything. But not in the way you might expect. He didn't sit down immediately. He stayed standing across the table, looking at the stack of documents, then at me, then back at the documents. I didn't speak first. Silence is uncomfortable for people who rely on control. Finally, he exhaled. "Where did you get this?" "Our joint accounts," I replied evenly. "That's private." I almost laughed. Private. After 2 years of redirecting marital assets, "That's marital property," I corrected calmly. His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." There it was, the script. Minimize, dismiss, reframe. I slid the bracelet receipt forward. $8,462.13. "Tiffany," I said quietly. The same week the electric was almost shut off. His eyes flickered. Not guilt. Annoyance. "That's not what you think." "Then tell me what it is." Silence. He didn't rush to explain. He calculated again. Which version of the truth would preserve the most leverage? "It was a gift," he said finally. "For who?" He didn't answer. I leaned back in my chair. "I've already seen the video." That landed. Not dramatically, but precisely. He blinked once. "You went through my things?" "You went through our money." Another silence. This one heavier. "You wouldn't understand," he said. "Understand what?" "Asset migration? Financial manipulation? Pre-dividing investments? You transferred $18,500 Tuesday," I continued, "to her firm." His face shifted. That was the one he didn't expect me to find. "It's a business opportunity." "With my retirement?" "It's an investment." "For who?" He didn't answer again, because the truth was obvious. Not for us. For him. For them. "You let me think we were struggling," I said quietly. "You let me cancel things. Adjust. Shrink. We were managing liquidity." "No," I replied. "You were reallocating loyalty." That hit harder than yelling ever could. For the first time, his composure cracked slightly. "You're being emotional." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being informed." That's when the shift happened. He pulled out a chair and sat down. Not as a husband, as a negotiator. "What do you want?" he asked. There it was. The language of transaction. As if this were a contract dispute, not a marriage. "I want full disclosure," I replied. All accounts, all transfers, all assets. And then what? Then I decide. He leaned back. You'd destroy everything over this? Destroy. Interesting choice of word. I didn't move $92,000 out of our future, I said quietly. You did. He didn't deny the number, because he knew it was accurate. You wouldn't survive this alone, he said. There it was. The threat beneath the strategy. Financial intimidation. You've never handled our investments, and you've never handled my awareness, I replied. Another silence. This one different. Because now he wasn't calculating advantage. He was recalculating me. He had built his entire strategy on one assumption, that I would remain financially disoriented, emotionally destabilized, dependent. He miscalculated. I can fix this, he said finally. How? I'll move things back, like nothing happened. Like the bracelet evaporates, like the hotel disappears, like the almost disconnection rewinds. It's not about moving money back, I said. It's about the fact that you moved it at all. He stood up abruptly. You're blowing this out of proportion. No, I said softly. I just stopped minimizing it. He ran a hand through his hair. You think she means more than you? I didn't answer immediately, because that wasn't the real question. It doesn't matter who means more, I said finally. What matters is who you chose to fund. That ended it. Not with screaming, not with tears, with clarity. He walked toward the bedroom, paused in the doorway. You're going to regret this. Regret what? I asked calmly. Turning this into a war. I looked at the stack of documents, the bracelet receipt, the transfer confirmations, the overdue electric notice screenshot. It became a war the day you weaponized our money, I said. He didn't respond. He closed the door behind him. And for the first time in 2 years, the house felt quiet, not tense, not fragile, clear, because confrontation isn't about yelling, it's about naming. And once something is named, it can't go back into shadow. But here's what I didn't expect. The next move wasn't defensive, it was aggressive, because men who build shadow lives don't surrender easily. They escalate. And what he did the following week forced me to make a decision that would change everything permanently. He didn't apologize the next morning. He didn't confess. He didn't even argue. He pivoted. That's what strategic people do when exposed. They don't collapse. They reposition. 3 days after the confrontation, I opened our banking app. My access had changed. Not removed, restricted. I could view balances, but transaction details were locked. Security update, the message said. Security. Interesting word choice. I called the bank immediately. Why can't I see transaction breakdowns anymore? The representative hesitated. There was an account permission adjustment made by the primary administrator. Primary administrator. He had shifted the structure. Quietly. Legally gray, but deliberate. I hung up and felt something colder than anger. He wasn't trying to repair the damage. He was trying to reestablish dominance. That evening, he was calm. Almost casual. I've restructured some accounts, he said while pouring coffee. For protection. Protection from who? I asked evenly. He met my eyes. From impulsive decisions. Impulsive, because requesting transparency after a $92,000 diversion was impulsive. I nodded slowly. I've also retained legal counsel, I replied. That landed harder than anything I'd said before. You did what? I retained counsel. For what reason? For asset clarification. He stared at me for a long time. Not shocked, assessing. You're really doing this, he said quietly. You already did this, I replied. That was the moment something invisible broke. Not love, not attachment, authority. He left early that night. No explanation, no strategy session, just silence. An hour later, I received a notification. Credit card alert. He had reduced the authorized user limit from $3,000 to $500. $500. That wasn't accidental. That was a message. Control can't always scream. Sometimes it whispers in limit reductions. I stared at the new available balance. $497.32. I smiled, not because it was funny, because it was predictable. The next morning, the internet stopped working. No warning, no outage in the area. Just ours. I called the provider. Service was voluntarily suspended. By him. He hadn't cut the electricity this time. He had cut connectivity, access, information, because information was my weapon now. I paid the overdue internet bill myself. Again. Not because I wanted to, but because I refused to operate blind. By Friday, I received an email from his attorney. Subject line: preliminary separation considerations. Separation. Not repair, not reconciliation, not mediation. Separation. He wasn't retreating, he was formalizing. Inside the email, proposed division framework. Heavily skewed. Investment allocations adjusted. LLC income categorized as independent growth. Bracelet purchase labeled personal discretionary. Personal discretionary, using joint liquidity. That's when my attorney called. They're trying to isolate pre-separation positioning, he explained. He's arguing some funds were strategic business expansion. Through her firm, I replied. Exactly. And the $92,000? We can challenge it. Challenge. Legal words sound calm, but they represent war. That weekend, he came home late again. No bag, no cologne explanation, just distance. We barely spoke, because now we weren't arguing emotionally. We were maneuvering financially. Sunday afternoon, he made his boldest move. He brought a realtor, without telling me. They walked through the house discussing square footage and listing potential. As is or staged? The realtor asked casually. As is, he replied. I stood in the kitchen, listening, not shocked, just absorbing. He wasn't just reallocating assets, he was accelerating exit. After the realtor left, I approached him. You're listing the house? It's a smart move. For who? For both of us. No. For him. Liquidity frees him faster. He looked at me differently now. Not dismissive. Cautious. Because the dynamic had shifted. I wasn't begging, I wasn't crying, I wasn't accusing, I was preparing. That unsettled him more than anger ever could. That night, I received another notification. Large withdrawal. $7,200. Cash. The same district again. The same pattern. He wasn't slowing down. He was doubling down. Because here's the truth about people who build shadow lives. When exposed, they don't immediately retreat. They accelerate before collapse. But what he didn't know, what he couldn't predict, was that I had already filed a temporary financial restraining order request through my attorney that afternoon. Emergency marital asset freeze. Pending review. He thought he was moving pieces freely. He didn't realize the board was about to lock. And when it did, the power dynamic would shift permanently. But before the court responded, he made one final attempt to destabilize me. And it had nothing to do with money. It wasn't money. It wasn't another transfer. It wasn't even her. It was our son. That's where he aimed next. 3 days after the realtor visit, Daniel picked him up early from school without telling me. I found out because the school called. Just confirming pickup authorization, the administrator said pleasantly. Yes, I replied carefully. His father is authorized, but my stomach tightened. Daniel had never done early pickup without texting first. When they came home that evening, our son ran inside excited. Daddy says we might move somewhere bigger. I froze. Bigger. Daniel walked in behind him, calm. We're exploring options, he said lightly. No need to overreact. Overreact. Again. I knelt down to my son's level. Sweetheart, nothing is changing without both of us deciding together. Daniel didn't like that. I could feel it. That night, after our son went to bed, he confronted me. You don't get to turn him against me. I'm not turning him against you, I said evenly. I'm protecting him from confusion. You're making this adversarial. No, I replied. You did that when you involved him in a plan I didn't agree to. His jaw tightened. He deserves stability. He deserves truth. And you think dragging this through court gives him stability? There it was. The pivot. Fear. Intimidation. He stepped closer. You won't win this, Naomi. Win. As if this were competition. I'm not trying to win, I said calmly. I'm trying to stop being erased. That word hit him harder than I expected. Erased. Because that's what financial manipulation does. It doesn't just redirect money. It redirects identity. It reframes you as dependent, as uninformed, as secondary. The next morning, I received a call from his attorney. Mr. Carter would prefer mediation before escalation. Escalation. They were worried. Not about marriage. About leverage. Because once a temporary financial restraining order is filed, transfers become traceable in court. Liquidation becomes suspicious. Asset concealment becomes dangerous. That afternoon, the court granted a temporary freeze on joint investment accounts pending review, effective immediately. I stared at the confirmation email. It felt quiet, not victorious, just balanced. When Daniel got the notification, he called instantly. "You froze the accounts?" "Yes. You had no right. I had every right. That money was positioned." "For who?" Silence. He inhaled sharply. "You're being vindictive." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being protective." He hung up, not dramatically, abruptly. That night, he didn't come home. No explanation, no text. I didn't call. I didn't chase. Because the dynamic had shifted. For 2 years, I had operated from reaction. Now I was operating from containment. The following morning, I received something unexpected. A direct message. From her, short, polished, cold. "I think there's been some misunderstanding about business arrangements." Business. Interesting choice of word. I didn't respond, but I screenshotted, forwarded to my attorney. Because here's what she didn't realize. Once legal frameworks engage, every message becomes documentation. By midweek, Daniel finally returned. He looked tired. Not emotionally, strategically. "You've made this messy," he said flatly. "No," I replied. "You made it expensive." He sat across from me. No anger this time, just calculation. "We can still fix this," he said, "if you stop escalating." "I escalated when I hired counsel," I replied. "You escalated when you transferred $18,500. Another silence. Then something shifted in his expression. For the first time. Fear. Not of losing me. Of losing control. "You'd really dismantle everything?" he asked quietly. I looked around the house. The framed photos. The couch I saved for. The kitchen where I once counted grocery coupons. "It was dismantled when you started funding a parallel life," I said. He leaned back. And in that moment, I realized something powerful. He had never expected resistance. He expected tears, begging, negotiation. He didn't expect precision. And that was his miscalculation. The following week, mediation was scheduled. Asset disclosures were requested formally. LLC records subpoenaed. Transfer histories flagged. The bracelet receipt included in exhibits. He thought he was orchestrating an exit. He didn't realize he was documenting his own exposure. And as mediation approached, I wasn't afraid. Because whether the marriage survived or dissolved, I was no longer operating in darkness. The electricity had almost gone out, but what he didn't understand was this. Once a woman learns how the power grid works, she stops living at the mercy of someone else's switch. And what happened in that mediation room changed the ending he thought he was writing. The mediation room was colder than I imagined. Not physically, strategically. Long table, neutral walls, 2 attorneys, 1 mediator, and the man who once said I was overreacting. Daniel didn't look at me when he walked in. He looked at the paperwork, stacked, organized, indexed, because this wasn't emotional anymore. It was documented. The mediator began with procedural language. "Today we'll review asset disclosures, liquidity concerns, and interim support proposals." Liquidity concerns. Interesting phrasing for where did the money go? Daniel's attorney opened with confidence. "My client has operated in good faith." I didn't flinch. Because good faith doesn't require hidden LLC transfers. Good faith doesn't involve liquidating ETFs while telling your wife the market is unstable. Good faith doesn't purchase bracelets labeled special order during cash flow strain. My attorney didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply slid printed transaction logs across the table. Highlighted, time-stamped, cross-referenced. The mediator adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Carter," he said carefully, "can you explain the $18,500 transfer from the joint investment account to Carter Strategic Holdings LLC?" Daniel cleared his throat. "It was repositioning. For what purpose?" "Future opportunities." "Were those opportunities disclosed to your spouse?" Silence. The room shifted. Then came the bracelet, the receipt, the hotel confirmation, the pattern. Not accusations, facts, and facts don't tremble. Daniel's attorney attempted reframing. These were business-related hospitality expenses. My attorney leaned forward calmly. Hospitality for whom? She placed the printed Instagram screenshot on the table. The matching date, the matching city, the matching bracelet. No raised voice, No dramatic reveal, just alignment. Daniel finally looked at me, not angry, not apologetic, evaluating. Because for the first time, he understood something. I wasn't fighting him emotionally. I was disassembling the illusion structurally. The mediator shifted tone. I would strongly advise resolution here. Translation. You don't want this in court. Discovery would not be kind. The asset freeze had already slowed his leverage. The LLC subpoena had triggered additional scrutiny. His liquidity wasn't what he'd projected. Because here's the part he didn't calculate. When you move money fast to impress someone else, you create gaps, and gaps get audited. By mid-session, the posture changed. No more confidence, no more positioning, just negotiation. Spousal support recalculated. Joint investment accounts restored proportionally. LLC profits to be disclosed quarterly pending final division. Temporary occupancy agreement. And something subtle but significant. Full financial transparency until decree finalized. The word transparency hung in the air. Daniel signed the preliminary agreement with a tight jaw. Not because he lost money, because he lost narrative control. When we stepped into the hallway during a break, he finally spoke to me directly. You didn't have to humiliate me. I looked at him evenly. I didn't. You made me look reckless. No, I said calmly. You did that when you underestimated me. He exhaled sharply. You could have handled this privately. I tried, for months, through questions, through conversations, through chances. What he wanted was quiet compliance. What I chose was structured clarity. When mediation concluded, the mediator shook both our hands. This was productive, he said. Productive. Strange word for dismantling a marriage. But maybe it fit. Because something was dismantled, not just the marriage. The illusion that I couldn't survive outside it. That night, Daniel didn't come home again, but this time, it felt different. Not abandonment. Detachment. The accounts were restored partially within 48 hours. Notifications pinged steadily. Funds reappearing. Balances stabilizing. The electricity metaphor returned in my mind. He had tried to flip the breaker quietly, to redirect power without announcement. But what he forgot was that I helped build the grid. 2 weeks later, during our son's soccer game, Daniel sat beside me on the bleachers. Careful distance. Measured. He didn't touch my hand. He didn't reach for me. But he said something unexpected. I didn't think you'd fight. There it was. Honesty. Small. Unpolished. Real. I wasn't fighting you, I replied quietly. I was fighting for balance. He nodded once. Not agreement. Recognition. Because men who rely on control often mistake calm for weakness. What they don't realize is this. Calm is often stored power. The final decree would come months later. Assets divided, properties reassigned, support structured. The marriage would not survive. But neither would the version of me that tolerated erosion in silence. And here's the truth I didn't understand when this began. It wasn't about the $18,500. It wasn't about the bracelet. It wasn't even about her. It was about narrative. He believed he could rewrite ours quietly. Transfer by transfer. Justification by justification. Until I no longer recognized my role. But what he didn't expect was that I would read the footnotes, cross-reference the details, and refuse to sign a story I didn't consent to. And as I tucked our son into bed that night, he wrapped his arms around my neck and said softly, "You always fix things." I smiled into his hair. Not because everything was fixed, but because something was me. And once you find your own footing again, no one gets to flip your switch without consequence. Not quietly, not strategically, not ever again. A few months after mediation, I saw her bracelet again. Not in person. Online. A photo from a rooftop dinner. City lights behind her. Wine glass lifted. That same diamond catching flash. For a moment, I expected to feel something. Jealousy. Anger. Vindication. Instead, nothing. Because by then, the symbolism had shifted. That bracelet was never about romance. It was about performance. And performance requires an audience. I wasn't the audience anymore. Daniel eventually tried to soften the edges of what happened. Small gestures, extra texts about our son, more punctual payments. He wanted civility, and I gave him civility, but not intimacy. not access, not narrative control. There's a difference. One evening, months later, when our son was staying with him, Daniel called unexpectedly. "I handled things badly," he said. It wasn't an apology, it was proximity to one. "I know," I replied. "I didn't think it would spiral." "It didn't spiral," I said calmly. "It revealed silence. Because revelation feels violent when you're the one exposed." He cleared his throat. "I thought if I just moved things around, it would stabilize." There it was again. Moved things around. Like money. Like emotions. Like loyalty. "People aren't accounts," I said. "You can't rebalance them quietly." He didn't argue. For once. And maybe that was growth. Or maybe it was fatigue. Either way, it wasn't my responsibility anymore. A year after everything collapsed, I hosted dinner at the house. Not the old house, the new one. Smaller, simpler, fully mine. The lights stayed on, because the bill was paid by someone who knew exactly where her money was going. Friends gathered around the table. Laughter, music, warm food. No performance, no illusion, no hidden transfers. At one point, one of my friends looked around and said, "You seem lighter." I was, because financial betrayal is heavy. It's not just numbers, it's disorientation. It's realizing the ground shifted beneath you while you were budgeting responsibly. It's trusting someone to co-pilot while they're quietly rerouting the flight plan. But here's what no one tells you. When someone secretly funds a different life, they eventually have to maintain it. And maintenance is expensive, emotionally, financially, energetically. And illusions depreciate faster than assets. The open loop from that Tuesday at 2:37 p.m., it wasn't just about where the money was going, it was about where I was going. Because the real discovery wasn't the LLC, or the bracelet, or the hidden transfers. It was this. I had built my identity around partnership stability, and when that partnership fractured, I had to build myself without it. That's terrifying. But it's also clarifying. Because once you survive financial destabilization, you stop fearing numbers, you start respecting them, tracking them, understanding them, owning them. I now know every account, every due date, every investment. Not because I'm paranoid, because I'm informed. And informed women are inconvenient to manipulate. Daniel still attends soccer games. We sit a few seats apart. We coordinate logistics. We discuss grades. Sometimes we even laugh about something small. It's functional. That's enough. He once said, "I never thought money would be the thing that broke us." It wasn't. Secrecy was. Money just left receipts, and receipts tell stories. As for her, I don't follow, I don't check, I don't wonder, because comparison is a trap. And I didn't fight through audits, mediation, and self-reconstruction just to measure myself against someone else's highlight reel. If he buys her diamonds, fine. If he funds dinners, fine. Because here's the difference now. I don't need to know. And I don't need to compete. The power isn't in what he spends anymore. It's in what I refuse to tolerate. If you're listening to this and something feels off in your own finances, don't panic. But don't dismiss it either. Patterns matter. Documentation matters. Calm matters. You don't need to explode to be powerful. You need to observe, track, confirm, and move strategically. Because shock fades, but evidence stands. The lights in my house glow softly every night now. Bills paid, accounts balanced, no surprises. Sometimes I stand in the kitchen where I once froze at 2:37 p.m., and I think about that woman. The one who couldn't breathe. The one staring at her phone. The one who thought the worst part was discovering where the money went. She had no idea. The hardest part wasn't finding the transfers. It was finding herself after them, but she did. And if I could tell her anything now, I'd say this. You weren't broke. You were misled. And once you stop funding someone else's illusion, you can finally invest in your own reality. And that return is worth more than any diamond bracelet ever was.